Bacteria. We can't live with them and we can't live without them. But I've seen a real shift in the last, 10, 20 years from, ooh, gross bacteria to bacteria. Some are good, some are bad. And they really run the gamut. What they lack in panache in terms of their appearance, as I've drawn little chains of them up here, they really make up for some unique abilities in terms of their chemistry. And that's where we'll focus in this lecture. In terms of our classification scheme, we're talking about these guys right here. You might be familiar with just a few of them. They go by kind of abbreviated scientific names like strep and staph and E. coli. So you may have run into a few of those guys before. Where do bacteria live? Where don't they live? It is astounding how many places you can find bacteria. Not only are they super abundant in the soil, but they live inside of plant leaves, inside of plant roots. They live in the clouds. They float around on the air. They live on snow. They're at the bottom of the ocean. They are deep into the earth. People have recently drilled down, I think it was over 1 kilometer into the ground, and found bacteria growing there. Even in oil deposits, bacteria are down there gobbling up oil. That's pretty amazing. Now, in terms of us personally, we are not alone, that's to be sure. We think of ourselves as one species, human beings, Homo sapiens. But in your intestines alone, there may be up to 1,000 species of bacteria. Probably second to your large intestine would be your mouth in terms of number of species of bacteria. It's a menagerie in there, it's crazy. And then your skin has lots of bacteria on them as well. None of this is a bad thing. Sometimes bacteria populations get out of control, and then it's a problem, like when you have an infection on a cut or something going wrong in your intestines that causes a lot of discomfort or gas or something. Then bacteria become a problem. But most of the time, they're just there camping out, doing us no harm, and even doing us a fair bit of good. To give you an idea of how abundant they are just in soil, take a look at this bunch of bacterial plates. Here's a bunch of bacteria grown right out of the soil. When we grow bacteria, usually it's on these petri dishes. They're filled with a gel full of nutrients for them. And they're so abundant in the soil that this first plate was diluted 100 times, and this last plate was soil diluted 1,000,000 times, but we're still finding bacterial colonies. Each of these colonies, by the way, is what has resulted from a single bacterium multiplying and multiplying until it's big enough to see, which is astounding given how small they are. You can see how quickly they replicate. Here's a bunch of E. coli grown just overnight. So overnight, those microscopic bacteria are growing into something you can see with the naked eye. In terms of the structure of bacteria, pretty simple. They're just single cells, and super small ones at that, about 10 times smaller than our own cells. They're prokaryotic cells surrounded by a unique cell wall. Bacteria are prokaryotic cells, which means they're pretty simple. Their DNA is just in this nucleoid area, shown in red here in the middle of the cell. So it's not surrounded by a membrane, there's no true nucleus, but like any cell, it has DNA. It has a plasma membrane that holds in the cytoplasm, including ribosomes. So in that respect, it's like any other cell. But there's a few unique features. One is the cell wall. It's made out of an interesting substance known as peptidoglycan. And this substance is often the target of antibiotics. It's how we can kill bacteria and not harm ourselves. Many times around that is a capsule, this sticky substance that protects bacteria, helps them stick to things, along with these little green projections called pili. Bacteria have to stick to their surfaces so they don't get washed away. And they also could use these pili to exchange bits of DNA known as plasmids. So all around in the cell, these little circular bits of DNA contain just 1 or 2 genes that they can actually exchange with other bacteria. One last interesting feature is the flagellum. And this whips around and helps the bacteria swim through fluid. It has a really weird feature though. it doesn't swish back and forth, it rotates. So here we see it embedded in the cell membrane itself, and then this long projection going out from there. But this hook actually rotates around like a propeller on a boat, and that's how it moves. Pretty strange, huh? Well, that's the intricate look on the inside of bacteria. From the outside, they don't look like much. Just these little dots or rods or little squiggly spirals. We can take a look at that in a different way and compare it to the width of a human hair. So if you were to put bacteria on a hair, this is what it would look like. In fact, we can even compare it to a cell scraped out of a cheek. And so this would be one of your own cells with the nucleus in the middle. And all these purple specks, those are bacteria. Don't worry, they're natural. We can even see these little spirally guys here in the bloodstream next to a red blood cell, which was one of the smallest cells in the human body. A lot of times these guys occur in chains like this cyanobacterium. It's a photosynthetic bacterium whose cells just kind of keep linking together. When bacteria reproduce, they can only do it asexually. Only one parent and all the offspring are identical, they're clones. Because of this simplicity, they can also reproduce really, really fast. And this provides us with some good opportunities, but also some problems as well. Because they multiply so fast, if we don't want them to, we need to slow them down. Now, since bacteria are just a single cell, then when they produce an offspring, that means their population has doubled. And after each of those two produce more offspring, the whole population has doubled again. This results in exponential growth, which looks like this. So if we're looking over time, and the y-axis charts the number of bacteria, even if we only start with a few, population growth starts out kind of slow. You go from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32, but then it really starts to take off and you get into the millions very quickly. And these guys can double in as little as 20 minutes. So every 20 minutes you're going double the population. So once you have 1 million, you go to 2 million really fast. This is part of what's behind the expiration date on things. Now, we use bacteria to make sour cream, but when bacteria get too abundant and take over, it tastes kind of gross. And you can smell it, and you can smell all those weird byproducts. So the expiration date is printed there because people know how many bacteria are already in that sour cream container. And if you put it in the refrigerator, the reason you do so is to sort of draw out that curve. Because the cold slows them down, they keep doubling, but they do it slower. And so that's why we refrigerate a lot of foods, to slow bacterial growth. Same with the freezer, just slows it down and extends the amount of time that we can keep it before it goes bad. Some of the practical applications of this insane growth of bacteria is that we need to keep their populations in check, because if they get too high, then they start causing some problems. So to bring them back down, we do things like bathing and washing our hands and brushing our teeth. Even using the toilet is getting rid of those excess bacteria in our large intestine. Even a single bacterium that gets into a patient in an open wound can really start multiplying and causing problems. So keeping bacterial populations under control is a real challenge, but a necessity. You'll learn a lot more about that when you take microbiology in a few quarters. Pretty safe to say that pretty much anything we can eat, bacteria can eat better. So we're in a constant battle with bacteria. They're always trying to eat our food, aren't they? Things go bad and rot, and that's just bacteria taking over and decomposing them. They're just living life. Now, on the other hand, they can digest things that we just can't. Like I said, they could digest anything we can, but in addition to the complex carbohydrates that we can digest, which are really just glycogen and starch, they can also digest cellulose and chitin, which, remember, make up the cell walls of fungi, exoskeletons of insects, and the plant cell walls. So bacteria have the ability to just wipe out fungi, and plants once they fall and start decomposing. So they can take care of all that stuff. About the only organic molecule that they can't get into is plastic, which is part of why it's used so extensively. Now I have this here not just to say that plastic isn't edible by bacteria, but to also point out that we use bacteria to actually process our food. Since they're so good at digesting things, we actually use them to pre-digest it for us and also to make it last longer, which sounds strange. So the sour cream I showed earlier, yogurt, these are dairy products which contain lactose. Some people are not tolerant of lactose and others are, but if bacteria get in here, they break down the lactose into lactic acid. And that's not a problem for us. It also turns the food acidic, drops the pH, and preserves it. It keeps other dangerous bacteria and mold out of here, so it actually keeps our food safe longer. And it doesn't just stop with yogurt, pickles as well. So they've taken the sugars inside of plant cells and turned them into lactic acid, which is the natural pickling process. A lot of pickles are just made by cooking them and putting them in vinegar, but actually even old vinegar is produced by bacteria fermenting those sugars. Bacteria are great fermenters, and they produce all kinds of crazy products, a lot of which smell kind of weird. And so when you smell vinegar and it's a vinegar bottle, you think nothing of it. But if you were to pick up a sandwich or something else and it smelled like vinegar, you'd probably throw it away. Those are good indications that something's gone bad, bacteria have taken over, they've fermented and produced these weird, smelly products as a result of that. So sometimes it's an advantage, other times it really indicates spoilage, but bacteria ferment lots of things. Bacteria are kind of weird. Unlike us, we need oxygen. A lot of bacteria are harmed by oxygen, and so they're natural fermenters. They break down food differently than we do and produce all those strange, smelly off products. Actually, even BO is a byproduct of bacteria. Actually, maybe this is encouraging. If you have BO, it's not you that smell, it's your bacteria. When we sweat from our armpits, actually a lot of protein is produced in that sweat. Not the sweat on your forehead, but in your armpits it is. And it's bacteria breaking down those proteins and fermenting that create those weird smells. Another good example of it. There's a group of bacteria that are also really important to plant life. I'll illustrate it here. It's called rhizobium. They live inside of plant roots. You can see the little specks there. And inside there, the plants feed them sugars, the bacteria ferment, and then they turn nitrogen from the air into ammonia, which fertilizes the plants. So a lot of plants are fertilized by bacteria. Really interesting relationship there, and an important one to plant life on Earth. Well, speaking of plant life, I forgot to add photosynthesis to the list. Some bacteria photosynthesize. They're called cyanobacteria. So they live right alongside other algae, creating foods using energy from the sun. Bacteria, can't live with them, can't live without them, like I said at the beginning. So from food processing to food spoilage, from photosynthesis to decomposition, bacteria do it all. And what they lack in interesting appearance, they really make up for in an interesting lifestyle. I hope you really look forward to taking microbiology in the future. Hopefully this has just piqued your interest and learning a little more about these amazing creatures that are very important to human health. Until next time, keep appreciating life.